If you live in the United States, and even if you don't, you've probably heard about a number of the country's prominent historical figures. But what about the history of those who were there before? Even many Americans know very little of Native American history. Each of these Native American chiefs was different and made different choices, but they all lived and died with a great love of their land and their people. One of many overlooked aspects of Native American history is the long list of exceptional men who led various tribes as chiefs or war leaders. Just as noble and brave as anyone on the Mexican, British, or American sides, many of them have been swept into the dustbin of history. In this video, we will show you some of the greatest Native American chiefs and leaders in the history. Let's go. Geronimo Acagoyatle. Perhaps the most famous Native American leader of all time, Geronimo was a medicine man in the Badonkohe band of the Chiricahua. He became a symbol of Native American resistance, taking on both the United States and Mexican military forces. His fierce spirit was fueled by a deep desire for vengeance, especially against Mexican troops who had brutally killed his entire family, including his wife, children, and mother. Geronimo's actions unfolded within the broader context of the enduring conflict between the Apache people and the encroaching white settlers on Apache lands. This conflict initially emerged from long-standing hostilities between the Apaches and Mexicans and later escalated into the Apache-American conflict. Between 1850 and 1886, the region witnessed a cycle of raids and retaliations that had become a way of life for both the Apaches and their adversaries. These raids involved plundering livestock for economic sustenance and capturing or killing individuals from all sides. Geronimo's unyielding resistance against numerous foes continued for over 3 decades. His fearsome reputation extended beyond his enemies, affecting his own Chiricahua tribe, as well as Mexican and U.S. military forces. In 1886, Geronimo eventually surrendered and became a prisoner of war, detained in various camps across Florida, Alabama, and finally at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. In his later years, he underwent a transformation, embracing Christianity as his chosen faith. Geronimo also took advantage of his own image, selling autographed photos of himself. He even had the distinction of riding a horse in President Theodore Roosevelt's inaugural parade in 1905. Sadly, Geronimo was never allowed to return to his tribal homeland, and he passed away at Fort Sill's hospital in 1909. Nonetheless, his legacy endures, exemplified by the use of the code name Geronimo for the mission that led to the death of Osama bin Laden in 2011 by the U.S. military. Chief Joseph. Chief Joseph, a revered Nez Perce leader, played a pivotal role in a tumultuous period of American history as he led his tribe, the Wallowa Band of Nez Perce, who called the Wallowa Valley in Oregon their ancestral home. Chief Joseph became a powerful advocate for his people's right to remain on their homeland. However, in 1877, the U.S. government forcibly removed the Nez Perce from their native land. They were given a mere 30 days' notice to leave their cherished homeland, and their initial resistance to this removal resulted in a series of violent confrontations. Eventually, they were ordered to relocate to a reservation in Lapwai, Idaho, setting the stage for what became known as the Nez Perce War. During the Nez Perce War, Chief Joseph led a small group of warriors accompanied by many women and children in an extraordinary and grueling journey, eluding U.S. troops over a distance of about 1,300 miles. In just 3 months, the Nez Perce crossed the states of Oregon and Montana. Their first attempt to find refuge was with the Crow in Montana, but they were turned away. Chief Joseph then led his people north, hoping to seek sanctuary with the Lakota tribe, led by Sitting Bull. The Nez Perce's remarkable skills in battle earned them respect and admiration, even from their opposing cavalry and the general public. Despite their valiant efforts, the war took a heavy toll. In the fall of 1877, after enduring a long and brutal struggle, Chief Joseph and his band surrendered in Montana, only 40 miles from the Canadian border, which would have offered them freedom. Tragically, many Nez Perce members had perished along the way, succumbing to freezing temperatures, starvation, or disease, including 5 of Chief Joseph's children. After the war, Chief Joseph and his people were never allowed to return to their homeland. In 1885, they were relocated to the Colville Indian Reservation in Washington, far from their original home in Idaho. In his later years, Chief Joseph spoke passionately about the hardships his people endured at the hands of the U.S. government. He held a vision of a future marked by equality for all, including Native Americans. Chief Joseph passed away from natural causes in 1904 and was laid to rest in Nespelem, Washington. His legacy endures as a symbol of resilience, advocacy, and the enduring hope for a more equitable world. King Phillip. Metacomet, also known as King Phillip, was a prominent Wampanoag leader whose tribe initially sought peaceful coexistence with the colonial settlers. He assumed the role of Sachem, chief, in 1662, following the deaths of his father and older brother. During his leadership, he actively engaged in trade with the colonists and even adopted the name King Phillip to honor the relations between the colonists and his father. He also purchased European-style clothing in Boston. Over time, as the Wampanoag tribe faced increased contact with and encroachment by the white settlers, their relations deteriorated. Metacomet's people endured numerous humiliations at the hands of the colonists. This period of conflict culminated in what is known as King Philip's War, which occurred from 1675 to 1678. The expansion of the colonies into Native American territories, combined with the Beaver Wars involving the Iroquois Confederation, placed significant pressure on Metacomet's tribe. In 1671, colonial leaders from the Plymouth colony imposed substantial concessions on the Wampanoag tribe. These pressures and injustices led to the outbreak of open hostilities in 1675, sparking King Philip's War. The primary aim of the Native American tribes during the war was to halt the expansion of Puritan settlements. The conflict persisted until 1678 and took a heavy toll on both sides. Tragically, Metacomet was assassinated on August 12, 1676, by a fellow Native American named John Alderman. Following his death, his wife and son were sold into slavery in Bermuda. Pontiac. Pontiac was a notable Ottawa war chief who played a significant role in the Native American resistance against British military presence, particularly in the Great Lakes region. He is most famously associated with Pontiac's War, a conflict during which he emerged as a prominent leader. Pontiac became an Ottawa war leader in 1747 when he aligned himself with New France in opposition to the Huron leader Nicolas Orantoni. During the French and Indian War, 1754 to 1763, he was a key ally of the French against the British forces. However, he grew dissatisfied with British policies following the French and Indian War. In response, a loose confederation of Native American groups formed to resist British occupation and expansion in North America. On April 27, 1763, Pontiac convened a council to propose a surprise attack on Fort Detroit. Pontiac's War officially commenced on May 7, 1763, when Pontiac, along with 300 of his followers, initiated an attempt to capture Fort Detroit. Over time, more than 900 warriors from various tribes joined the siege. Pontiac and his supporters besieged the fort for approximately 6 months. They achieved a significant victory on July 31st during the Battle of Bloody Run, where they repelled a British detachment. However, they were ultimately unable to capture Fort Detroit. By October of the same year, the siege was lifted, and Pontiac and his followers withdrew to the Illinois country. Pontiac's influence waned following the unsuccessful siege of Fort Detroit. Tragically, Pontiac was assassinated on April 20, 1769, by a Peoria warrior whose name has not been recorded, Mangus Coladas. The father-in-law to Kosis and one of the most influential chiefs of the 1800s, Mangus Coladas, was a member of the Apache. Born just before the turn of the 19th century, he was notably tall and assumed leadership of his band in 1837 after his predecessor, and many of their band members were killed. These deaths were the result of Mexico's disturbing practice of offering money for Native American scalps, regardless of who they belonged to. In response, Mangus Coladas and his warriors embarked on a series of retaliatory actions, which included the massacre of the citizens of the town of Santa Rita. When the United States declared war on Mexico, Mangus Coladas viewed them as potential allies who could help protect his people. He signed a treaty with the Americans, allowing their soldiers to pass through Apache lands. However, as was often the case, the discovery of gold and silver in the region led to the abandonment of the treaty. By 1863, the United States raised a flag of truce, ostensibly in an attempt to negotiate peace with the Great Chief. Regrettably, he was betrayed, falsely accused of attempting to escape, and killed, followed by the mutilation of his body. Asa Daklugie, a nephew of Geronimo, later revealed that this event marked a turning point for the Apache people, who subsequently engaged in the mutilation of those unfortunate enough to fall into their hands in retaliation. Crazy Horse Aka Tasunke Witko. Crazy Horse will always be remembered as one of the great native Indian warriors who fought to the last. He was another Indian leader who fought alongside Sitting Bull in the Battle of Little Bighorn. He allied with the remaining Native American chiefs to expel the whites from their territory. It was he who killed General Custer, a scene that has been portrayed in numerous movies such as They Died with Their Boots On, Fort Apache, The Great Sioux Massacre, or Winchester 73. Tasunke Witko was the chief of the Oglala, one of the Sioux tribes. At 16 years of age, he adopted his father's name and fought in his first battle. In the Treaty of Fort Laramie, signed by Chief Red Cloud, the Indians renounced a part of their territories but received others, among them the Black Hills, a sacred site for Native Americans. However, the problems began when rumors started to fly about the existence of gold at that place. Many settlers started to move to the area, and despite attempts to buy the territory, the Indians refused. Crazy Horse, just like Chief Sitting Bull, refused the Treaty of Fort Laramie and declared war on the Americans. He did not die on the battlefield, but rather was treacherously assassinated by a North American soldier who stabbed him with a bayonet in the back. Sitting Bull, or Tatanka Ayotanke. Sitting Bull was a hero, a soldier, and one of the best leaders of all time, who lived his life fighting for the rights of his people and died defending them. He dedicated himself to defending his people's land and traditional way of life, which were under threat due to the encroachment of white settlers on tribal territories guaranteed by treaties. The United States government consistently sought to relocate Native Americans to reservations, a policy that violated previous agreements and deeply concerned Sitting Bull. He experienced a vision in which he saw the defeat of the 7th Cavalry Regiment, leading to the famous Battle of the Little Bighorn. During this battle, Sitting Bull and other war leaders masterminded the defeat of U.S. troops, resulting in the death of Lieutenant Colonel Custer and all of his men. Following this significant victory, Sitting Bull and his followers faced a U.S. military counteroffensive. To evade capture, they fled to Canada, specifically Wood Mountain in the Northwest Territories, now Saskatchewan. Sitting Bull eventually returned to U.S. territory in 1881, where he surrendered to U.S. forces and was held as a prisoner of war for 2 years. After his release, he settled on the Standing Rock Indian Reservation, located in present-day North Dakota. There, he became a successful farmer and even joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Throughout his life, Sitting Bull remained a staunch critic of U.S. Indian policy. In 1890, U.S. Indian agent James McLaughlin ordered his arrest. During the arrest attempt, there was a confrontation, resulting in Sitting Bull being shot in the head and killed. He was laid to rest in Fort Yates, North Dakota. Geronimo. Geronimo was not an official Apache chief, but he was a strong leader, a fierce warrior, and a medicine man. He joined with other Apache bands to fight off the Mexican and American military. Born in June 1829, he was immersed in the Apache way of life from an early age. As a young boy, he followed the tribal customs, including swallowing the heart of his first successful hunting kill. He had already led 4 separate raids by the time he turned 18. Like many of his people, Geronimo endured significant hardships at the hands of the civilized individuals around him. His wife and 3 young children were killed by Mexicans who still controlled the land at the time. Although he harbored deep-seated animosity toward Americans, his abhorrence for Mexicans endured throughout his life. In 1848, Mexico ceded control of vast territories, including Apache lands, in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. This set the stage for continuous conflict between the new American settlers and the indigenous tribes residing on the land. Eventually, Geronimo and his people were forcibly relocated from their ancestral lands to a desolate reservation in Arizona, a situation that Geronimo deeply resented. Over the next decade, he led numerous successful breakouts, continuously pursued by the U.S. Army. He became a celebrity figure for his daring escapes, capitalizing on the public's fascination with the Wild West. On September 4, 1886, he surrendered for the last time and experienced various periods of imprisonment. Shortly before his death, Geronimo made a plea to President Theodore Roosevelt, seeking the return of his people to their homeland. But his appeal was unsuccessful. He took his final breath in 1909, following an accident while riding his horse. On his deathbed, he reportedly lamented, "I should never have surrendered. I should have fought until I was the last man alive." Kosis or Shikashi. Almost nothing is known about the childhood of one of the greatest Apache chiefs in history. In fact, no one is even sure when he was born. In a time when his height, around 183 centimeters, 6', was considered quite tall, Kosis presented an imposing presence. He was a respected leader of the Chiricahua tribe and led them on various raids, targeting both Mexicans and Americans at different times. However, it was his attacks against the United States that would ultimately seal his fate. The pivotal moment came in 1861 when a raiding party from a different Apache tribe kidnapped a child. An inexperienced U.S. Army officer wrongly accused Kosis's tribe of the act. An attempt to arrest the Native Americans who had come for peaceful discussions escalated into violence, leading to fatalities. Kosis managed to escape the tense meeting by cutting a hole in the tent and fleeing. This incident set off a series of retaliatory acts of torture and execution by both sides, with no apparent end in sight. However, the outbreak of the U.S. Civil War redirected the Army's attention, leaving Arizona to the Apache. Less than a year later, the Army returned, armed with howitzers, and began to systematically dismantle the tribes that were still in conflict. For nearly a decade, Kosis and a small band of fighters remained hidden among the mountains, resorting to raids when necessary and skillfully evading capture. Eventually, Kosis was offered a significant portion of Arizona as a reservation. His response to this offer was profound. The white man and the Indian are to drink of the same water, eat of the same bread, and be at peace. Sadly, Kosis did not have the chance to enjoy the fruits of his efforts for long, as he fell seriously ill and passed away in 1874. Chief Seattle. Chief Seattle, born in 1790, was a prominent figure who lived in the region of present-day Washington state, residing near the Puget Sound. He was a chief of 2 different tribes due to his parentage and initially extended a welcoming attitude toward the settlers who began arriving in the 1850s. In return, the settlers established a colony on Elliott Bay and named it after the respected chief, honoring his name. However, tensions arose as some local tribes expressed resentment toward the encroachment of the American settlers. Occasional violent conflicts occurred, culminating in an attack on the small Seattle settlement. Chief Seattle believed that his people would eventually be displaced from their ancestral lands by the newcomers. He argued against resorting to violence, asserting that it would only expedite their displacement. His sentiment contributed to a more peaceful coexistence between the indigenous people and the settlers. Chief Seattle went on to convert to Christianity, embracing the faith for the remainder of his life. In a nod to the chief's traditional religious beliefs, the people of Seattle paid a nominal tax for the use of his name when naming the city. It was believed that mentioning the name of a deceased person prevented them from resting peacefully. Fun fact: the famous speech, often attributed to Chief Seattle, emphasizing humanity's responsibility to care for the environment, is entirely fabricated. The speech was written by a man named Dr. Henry A. Smith in 1887. Chief Cornstock. More popularly known by the English translation of his Shawnee name, Hokolesqua, Chief Cornstock was born sometime around 1720, probably in Pennsylvania. In the 1730s, like many Shawnee, Cornstalk and his people relocated to Ohio due to continuous conflicts with encroaching white settlers, particularly disputes arising from the introduction of alcohol. It was during the French and Indian War that Cornstalk first tasted battle, as his tribe aligned with the French. Another, less renowned conflict known as Lord Dunmore's War erupted in 1774, and once again, Cornstalk found himself thrust into the midst of battle. However, the colonial forces swiftly overpowered the Shawnee and their allies. This defeat compelled the Native Americans to sign a treaty, relinquishing all lands east and south of the Ohio River. Cornstalk, a man of his word, honored the agreement until his death. Yet many other Shawnee resisted the loss of their territories and secretly plotted for future attacks. In 1777, Cornstalk, acting as a peacemaker, visited an American fort to warn them of an impending siege by hostile Native American forces. Regrettably, he was taken prisoner and subsequently murdered by vengeful colonists, despite his good intentions. Chief Cornstalk's most enduring legacy goes beyond his actions in life. Following his death, reports of a mysterious flying creature, later named the Mothman, began to emerge in West Virginia. Some attributed the creature's appearance to a supposed curse that Cornstalk had placed on the land in response to the treachery that led to his demise. This legend has added a unique layer to his historical significance, forever connecting him to the folklore of the region. Tecumseh. Another Shawnee war leader, Tecumseh was born in the Ohio Valley sometime around 1768. In his early years, he engaged in raids with an older brother, targeting various frontier towns in Kentucky and Tennessee. Following a series of Native American defeats, Tecumseh relocated to Indiana, where he gathered a group of young warriors and earned recognition as a respected war chief. During this time, one of Tecumseh's younger brothers experienced a series of visions and became a religious prophet. He even accurately predicted a solar eclipse. Tecumseh harnessed his brother's prophetic abilities to unite various indigenous groups and establish a settlement known as Prophetstown, also recognized as Tippecanoe in the United States. One fateful day, while Tecumseh was away on a recruiting mission, future U.S. President William Henry Harrison launched a surprise attack on Prophetstown, setting it ablaze and resulting in the loss of numerous lives. Despite the devastation, Tecumseh remained angered by the mistreatment of his people by the United States. Consequently, when the War of 1812 began, he allied himself with Great Britain. Sadly, Tecumseh met his end during the Battle of the Thames on October 5, 1813. Strangely, even though he was a consistent adversary to the Americans, They swiftly transformed Tecumseh into a folk hero, acknowledging his impressive oratory skills and his indomitable spirit. Blackhawk. Blackhawk was a member of the Sauk tribe and later became a war leader. He was born in Virginia in 1767, and there is limited information available about his early life. His prominence began when he joined the British side during the War of 1812, and he and his followers became known as the British Band. Blackhawk was also a subordinate of Tecumseh, another notable Native American leader. A rival Sauk leader signed a treaty with the United States, possibly under deceptive circumstances, which resulted in the cession of a significant portion of Sauk land. Blackhawk refused to acknowledge this treaty, sparking decades of conflict between his followers and the United States. In 1832, Blackhawk and a group of 1,000 to 1,500 Native Americans returned to a disputed area in Illinois, which triggered the Blackhawk War. This conflict lasted for only 15 weeks, during which approximately 2/3 of the Sauk who entered Illinois lost their lives. Blackhawk himself evaded capture until 1833, when he was eventually released. Following his release, he lived the last 5 years of his life in Iowa, where he was somewhat disgraced among his people. A few years before his death, he dictated his autobiography to an interpreter, becoming a public figure in the United States. So, which of these historical figures impresses you the most? Comment down below to let us know. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you on the next video.